This is a bum wrap. I'm Robert Bumgardner. This will be part three of our introduction. Part three is going to cover the interview room itself. Once we get done with part three, the rest of the podcast will be shifted over to subscription only for law enforcement. Let's talk about the interview room. Every police department has them, hopefully. Some are more sophisticated than others, and some of them aren't sophisticated at all. In any event, I'm hoping that the police department is their interview room can be some type of room, rectangular, square. You're going to have a door inside this room. Typically, it may have soundproofing or not. It may have a mirrored window that you can see only in one direction or not. Um, most police departments now have some type of video camera to protect everybody and document the statement that's obtained and the legality of it. You've got a door. You walk through the door. This interview room is basically your stage. This is the movie that you're going to produce. This is the play that you're going to write. You're the director. Contained inside this room will be a table, three chairs. Uh, Typically, that's it. It may be a large room. So there's really a trick to the room itself, the interview room. It's not just a room. It's part of your stage. So what are you going to do about it? Well, for one thing, your perpetrator needs to be seated as facing the door, but the detectives need to be between the door and the perpetrator that's sitting at the far table. He's facing the door. Psychologically, that kind of tells your perp that you're in control. You're not going out through that door unless you go through the detective. I've actually seen interviews where this wasn't done. I think it's a simple thing, but it's important that the detective needs to be have the door to his back, facing the perpetrator. I'm going to assume that you've got two detectives that are going in for this interview. These two detectives have a certain amount of evidence, or is my luck, no evidence at all, but they have to present an interview to the perp. So you and your partner, you have to establish roles. Uh, One detective is probably going to do a lot of the talking. The other detective should be listening to what's going on and thinking about the next thing to do. This is not a break time for the second, we'll call them second chair, second banana, whatever you want to call them. This detective already knows what the script is when you walk through the door. Unfortunately, circumstances change once you enter the room. These two detectives have to have the ability to shift gears, and your plan oftentimes, just goes out the window. So think of a table being rectangular. You've got your perpetrator on the far end of the table. So you've got a chair that's in the middle of the table, and if it's a long rectangular table, you've got uh, a detective the furthest away from the perp. The detective that's closest to the perp, the hot chair, in all likelihood, is probably going to be doing most of the talking. Physically, he's closer to the suspect than the other detective. We'll talk about other techniques once we get into the body of the subscription. But this middle position detective, can stay in the middle, but you could start to scoot towards the suspect. You could this You're taking up his body space. You could start in the middle, and then you could start moving during the interview closer and closer to him. Something that's very effective is that you're not being offensive, but your knee is slightly touching his knee. You're that close. As I said before, the middle person, the hot seat, he's going to be doing a lot of the talking. I have conducted interviews where I had uh, the middle position. The detective was in the hot seat, and he did most of the talking, and I just sat at the far end and listened to the whole interview. Uh, there were some problems with the interview that had to be cleared up. Um, we had to we had to change our direction and where we were going. The detective that was in the hot seat was a new detective and so forth, and he was trying to do the best job that he could. Um, However, the confession was obtained not from the middle detective in the hot seat, but by myself on the far end of the table. I didn't say very much. I just listened to what the other detective was saying. As long as it was in the right direction, it was correct. Um, Basically, at the end of the interview, I kind of closed the interview out and obtained the confession. Surprisingly enough, the perpetrator wanted to make a comment that he knew that the detective that was in the middle chair was not the interviewer, that I sat there the whole time watching him like a hawk. And you get your compliments where you can. So you walk into the room, you got your table, you got your positions. Who's going to be doing all the talking? You've also got other options in this interview room. Remember, this is a theatrical production. This is a play. You could stand. Not both detectives, but one detective can stand. You could change the position of the table from against the wall to the middle of the room. A detective that's standing above a seated perp is a little bit more aggressive. You could stand back. You don't have to be too commanding and so forth. But standing up is one of your options. Standing behind the perpetrator, talking to him over his shoulder, that's another option. Now we're putting the gas pedal down at this point, and there's different techniques that you'll use in your interview room. If you think that you're going into a room and sitting in a chair and you're just going to kick back and do the lounge chair interview, you're probably wrong. Everything in that room is important. Your position, where you've got your perpetrator. Don't allow your perpetrator to run your interview and stand up over you. That's not the way it works. You don't have to be, you know, overly dominant, but you are in charge of your interview, and you need to stay on the topic at hand, which is generally his guilt. Um, you could. The interview room is going to contain some other props. That would be your case file. That would be some of the evidence that you have. Your case file could be a half-inch thick. Uh, I would suggest that you have the perpetrator's name at least with a black Sharpie, taped to the file folder. Make it kind of heavy. Make it about a half inch to an inch thick. Throw it on the table. Don't ever make any reference to the file. If you've got a really big case, but you don't have as much evidence as you want, get you a cardboard baker box, fill it up with some books, and put the perpetrator's name on it, and slam it on the table. Don't ever open up the box, and don't ever let the perpetrator see anything that's in that file. It's a prop. Um, Witnesses can be a prop. When you have a play, you have main actors, but you also have minor actors and so forth. I can't I can't remember the number of times where I had a witness that really wasn't a witness to a crime. It was actually a government employee that I asked to come in and point their finger at the perp and say, "Yeah, that's him." Um, it's perfectly legal. There's nothing illegal about it. If the circumstances call for it, like an outdoor scene where someone is putting something into a vehicle that they should not be doing, like stolen goods or a dead body, it wouldn't be unusual for a witness to come in and I like face to face confrontation. Um, I've done multiple perps, say two perps in individual rooms where one of my suspects gives me a statement. He's not going down for this whole crime, which in this particular case was an armed robbery murder. The main shooter couldn't believe that the getaway driver would give him up, so I handcuffed the getaway driver. He actually wasn't a getaway driver. He delivered the guy at the liquor store, and after the shots were fired, he left his buddy there. I handcuffed him, brought him into the room, and said, "Tell your buddy what you just told me." He's saying he wasn't at the liquor store. So the other person involved in this armed robbery, face to face, told the my perp, "Yeah, I drove you to the liquor store when the shots went off. I drove the car off. I told you I wasn't going to be the getaway driver if I heard you shooting that gun again." That's pretty much face to face. And, you can't get more direct in placing a suspect at a scene of a crime as having physically his partner in there saying, "Yeah, you were there. I drove you there." These are props. These are actors. This particular case involved the getaway driver was a carjacking. It was a limo driver. Once this gentleman's getaway driver fled the scene after he killed somebody inside the liquor store, he went to a limousine and carjacked the man, put a gun to his head, and made the limo driver drive him away. We found out who this limo driver was, and as we typically do, we did a photographic lineup of 6 pictures, and guess what? The limo driver couldn't pick him out. He was too scared. He had a gun to the side of his head while he was driving. I received a note from the other detectives. It looked like the case was just going downhill, and I thought about directing a movie, uh, producing a play, my actors, and so forth. So I had in my mind that if the limo driver couldn't identify the suspect, that didn't mean that the suspect couldn't identify the limousine driver. So I made arrangements to have another stage right, brought in the limo driver. He had his lines arranged by the other detectives. We put all together. He just took his finger and said, "That's him." I said, "Thanks for coming down. We'll talk to you later." The door closed. The perp said, "Who was that?" And my only statement to him was, "It was a friend of yours." Within 5 to 10 minutes, I had a complete confession from the shooter because the limousine driver didn't identify the perp, but the perp identified the limousine driver. He knew who he was because he spent quite a bit of time with a gun against his head trying to get away from the liquor store after he committed a murder. Don't be shy about in your in your play or your movie introducing actors, introducing evidence. I've been known to have a warrant completely filled out with the suspect's name on it, signed by a judge. I'll show it to him. The only problem is the judge wasn't available at that time of the night, and I'm the one that signed as the judge. But the perpetrator doesn't know what the judge's signature looks like. But if I want to get down by the river and sing sad songs, I'm going to show him a warrant for murder. And I presented it to the judge, and it's been signed. It's right here. I'll show it to you. Of course, that's just a prop. Don't be afraid to use props and whatever you can get your hands on. In terms of the stage or the interview room, it has happened in the past, in my experience, where we've removed the perpetrator from the room for the purposes he may smoke a cigarette, or we have to take him to have a bathroom break. While we're in the process of doing that particular function, we take him back to that room or another room, and the table and chairs are missing. The perpetrator will say out loud, and I don't understand this, "Where did my table go?" As if they're not in enough trouble, they're worrying about a table that belonged to the government that's been there for 30 years, piece of crap table. But all of a sudden he's all worried because his environment changed. "Where's my table?" Well, there's no table and chairs anymore. Or we may have a chair and he'll sit in the chair and both detectives are standing up in the middle of the room. If you want to increase the heat on your interview, then you move the chair to the corner. And then you have two detectives on either side of them in the corner. If you want to increase the heat even more, take your prop, your chair, out of the room and stand him up in the corner. If you want to make your point about a warrant, which is usually a fake warrant that I wrote up myself, I've been known to take tape and tape the warrant to the perpetrator's chest. In terms of costume, we have costume changes and interview rooms. One of the problems with dealing with suspects is they don't believe that they're going to jail. Well, you can solve that problem while you're doing the interview by having them strip down and have the shoes and blues that prison inmates wear. You'll inventory their clothes and take it to the sheriff's department. You change them out, change them into that prison outfit right then and there. And it goes a long way towards convincing a suspect or a perp that they're going to jail when they have to take their clothes off and they've got a prison outfit on, because that's or jail, because that's what they're going to be wearing. We had one particular interview where the female perp was just absolutely not going to give us the information, so we uh, we didn't get the confessions. We had some of it on videotape, the crime itself. So in the process of booking her in the sheriff's department, the female sheriff's deputy advised us that she couldn't go in there with the 2-inch nail things that they clip onto their nails and the the braided hair and so forth. It was against their rules for them to have braided hair. When that was removed and she was put into a jail outfit, she was brought back to the same interview room with a whole new perspective on what she was involved in, and that confession was obtained because her hair changed, because her fingernails that were, you know, glue on nails or something of that nature, convinced the person in the reality of what was going on. Being placed in jail clothes would be a stark reality too. Um, we would have a lot of noise at headquarters above our head where the maximum security is, or we'd have noise from the next room. And you use this is like a gift because you can't generally create noise, but there's a lot of physical activity going on uh, in a maximum security jail above your head. And we would work on that audio gift and just advise how violent the jail is. That's where you're going upstairs. That's all that noise you hear up there. They're raising Cain. That's where you're going to be headed to. You'll be up there for quite a while. Or the room next door, which would be another interview room. And that would be, oh, well, that's your co-defendant giving up the information. I talked to him before I walked into here, into this room. Everything in the interview room is not a room, it's a theater. If something happens like noise above your head, make that part of your play. Write that into your script. Oh, we planned on that. If someone's in a raising sand next door in the room next to you, that was planned too. Uh, Everything that it's a role. You're playing a role and you have props. And your table, chairs, in that room is a stage, and it's going to be choreographed the way it should be choreographed by yourself. We had one table in room number 2. The legs were only put together with duct tape. The legs had been broken. I don't know when they were broken, but if you needed a table for drama to break, uh, room number 2, that table was, the legs were right next to you, and they would break real quick because they were only held together by, some duct tape. It's my understanding. I think Elton John did that a lot with the four-legged bench that he sat on when he was playing the piano, because I could see them taping the legs back on. Now, I don't think Elton John did any interrogations, and he was a great performer. He put on a really good show. The podcast on interviews and interrogations, it is a show. You might not be an entertainer, but you're putting on a show and you're assuming a role within that room. And it's not a room, it's your stage. It's your movie set. And when you get your confession, you get your statement, you got them as close to admitting to the crime as you can. As a director, you could say, cut. That's a print. Nowadays, this is going to be on an audio tape or a videotape and so forth. Originally, years ago, it was not, but it doesn't mean that it's any less important, and it doesn't mean that it's any less of a role or it's a production, a theatrical production. This will just about cover interviews, rooms on part 3. The rest of the podcast will be a subscription. I hope that there's a detective. I need one detective to listen to a podcast. Well, I don't care which podcast it is. And if you consider trying one thing in your box of tools that you're trying to add more tools, I mean, tell me what man doesn't want to go to Home Depot and buy some more tools? And you'll consider trying something different. Maybe it'll work. That's how I continued developing different techniques by reading, observing other detectives, going like, that maybe that'll work. I mean, I never thought about using the office printer as a lie detector test, but I've done it before. You just have to be able to put the paper in right that's going to say true or false. If your suspect or perp is dumb enough to think a copy machine is a lie detector test, and so be it. If it works. All right. Enough of that. This will be the end of part number 3, interview rooms, and we'll move on to the regular subscribed podcast. And I appreciate your time.